welcome to 4C Radio. We are broadcasting from the central campus of Christ University, Bengaluru. 4C Radio is brought to you by the Department of Media Studies, Christ University. For all those who are looking for a platform that focuses on communities, commons, climate, and communication, this is the place to be. What's more, this station is run by a diverse community of students and dedicated faculty members. Tune in to experience hard-hitting interviews, fact checks, and myth-busting, on-ground stories, campus news, and more. This episode marks a very special day as we celebrate one incredible year of 4C. 1 year of myth-busting, campus calling, and meaningful conversations on diverse topics at the intersection of communication, politics, and communities. This episode features an interview with Jairam Ramesh, a senior Indian politician and a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha representing Karnataka. He has previously held the position of Minister of State, Independent Charge at the Ministry of Environment and Forests. He spoke to Professor Prachi Pinglay on his association with Dr. Madhav Gadgil, the process behind the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, and the need for sustainable economic growth.
Thank you so much for joining us today on 4C Radio. It is indeed a great pleasure to have you on our podcast. I actually wanted to start by letting you know that in our inaugural episode 1 year ago, we had interviewed Dr. Madhav Gadgil, and he had mentioned you when he spoke about the report that he worked on. And he very fondly remembered you as a peculiar minister in the government who let the report to be unfolded, unraveled, and worked upon. So I really wanted to just start with that. How did it all go at your end when the report was being drafted or worked upon, and what was your initial reaction to it when the report came out?
I recall visiting Kotagiri, in the Nilgiris in the early part of 2010. And this was a round table that had been organized on issues related to the protection of the Western Ghats. There were a lot of local people, there were a lot of activists, a lot of academics who were present. And the idea arose that there must be a systematic study on the threats that are being posed to the Western Ghats, all the way from Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, extending to Tamil Nadu, the entire stretch of the Western Ghats, mining, infrastructure, road projects, urbanization, various issues. So it had not been studied in a very systematic manner. And what are the options that are available to the government, to the central government as well as to the various state governments? Because demographic pressures are inevitable, developmental pressures are inevitable.
Yes.
So how do we manage conservation, protection with demographic pressures as well as with developmental challenges? I think almost everybody said that, we must set up a committee, we must set up an expert group. I thought about it, and the only person that came to my mind, actually, literally, was Madhav Gadgil. And I remember this meeting may have been in February of 2010. I mean, there were a lot of people who were there. And immediately I said, I think I know the right person who will head such an exercise. So I came back to Delhi and I said, look, this is the broad background. Would you agree to be head of this panel? So he immediately agreed. He suggested a few names. I talked to a couple of others. I got more names and we set up this committee. I had only one interaction with the committee. I said, look, you ought to be independent. You're professional. You're free to do what you want, how you'd want to do it. I'm not going to sit in judgment on what you say. I come in only after you have submitted your report. So they started functioning, I think, in the month of May or June of 2010. After I had demitted office, I was Minister of Environment till July of 2012. Then I moved to rural development. So their report really came later. So I was present at the creation. I was present at the conception, but I was not present at the time of its submission. But then, of course, I talked to Madhav, and I had a little role in making the report public because the initial reaction was confidential. Why do we need to make it public? So I had a bit of a role in making sure that the report got public. Then it got shared with the state governments, and then you know the history. There was
Yeah.
the Kasturi Rangan panel.
Yes.
It's still under discussion,
Yes.
and the protection levels afforded by the Kasturi Rangan panel were far lower than the protection
Yes.
levels that were recommended by the Gadgil panel. But even the reduced Kasturi Rangan level was not acceptable to many of the states.
Yeah.
So this is the background to the whole
Yeah.
Western Ghats thing here. My instruction to them was, you are free to do what you have. You do your consultations, you do your interactions in whatever manner you deem fit. And I think Gadgil was really a grassroots democratic panel.
Right.
They did a lot of consultations with Gram Panchayats. They did a lot of consultations with people's organizations. Of course, they did consultations with state governments. The Kasturi Rangan panel was more of a satellite-based, so-called.
Almost it felt as if it was to somehow bring some kind of buffer to what the recommendations.
Yeah, the Gadgil panel was truly democratic.
Yeah.
It was grassroots democracy. Of
Yeah.
course, a lot of ecological science because Madhav was the most distinguished ecological
Yes.
scientist we have had. Kasirangan, great man, very good friend of mine,
Yeah.
great space scientist, but looked at it from a scientific point of view. Whereas I think Madhav looked at it from not just a scientific point of view. He
Yeah.
also looked at it from the point of view of people, of livelihoods,
Rights based
of
and
long-term sustainability,
long
and so
term.
on.
Yes. In fact, we also discussed at the time that unfortunately, much later, when all the ecological or natural disasters kept happening over a period of time, especially the landslides and floods in Kerala, and then the report sort of came back as if we should have listened to this more. We should
Yes,
have.
actually, people thought it was an academic exercise. But, the recurrence of floods in the Western Ghats, landslides, natural disasters, people still remember the Gadgil panel. People
Yes.
still talk about it. In fact,
Yeah.
it has remained not just as an academic exercise,
Yeah.
but as an opportunity that we have lost.
Disturbing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look at it this way. I mean, there were floods in Coorg. There were
Yes.
extraordinary, unprecedented floods in Kerala,
Yes.
landslides in Kerala. I mean, the total unpredictability of monsoons,
Yes.
mining activity,
Yes.
unregulated mining
Yes.
activity, rail projects, in the Western Ghats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the relevance of the report is still there.
I want to bring you to current two issues that are like really occupying the environmental space these days, the Great Nicobar project and the mining project. Over a period of time, I don't want to say just the last decade but let's say in the past couple of decades, if you want to look at it, the debate over environment versus development has become so lopsided or polarized, and despite seeing enough of climate change related impact, in spite of seeing all of the suffering that people go through because of unregulated development, if we may call it that, the projects and the plans to deforest do not seem to stop. How do you really look at all this that's going on? I mean, because you spoke about it very recently, so I wanted to ask you about.
No, I think everybody agrees that environment and development should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
This has become a mantra.
Yeah.
Everybody says we need environmental protection,
Yes.
but we also need faster economic growth. We need infrastructure expansion, and so on. Let's start with the acceptance that everybody wants environmental protection and everybody wants faster development. Question is, in what is the best way in which we can bring about this marriage between environment and development? I think it's important to recognize that there will be occasions where choices will have to be made. In some occasions, the choices will be in favor of the developmental aspect, with safeguards, of course. In some cases, there will be decisions that will be taken in which you have to say, no, we will give priority to the environment because it would lead greater deforestation or loss of livelihoods of local tribal communities. So these choices have to be made. Now the question is, how do you make these choices?
Mm.
Are these choices going to be made in closed rooms by technocratic processes, or
Right.
is it going to be done in a very authoritarian manner, or is
Mm.
it going to be done in a participative, consultative manner with the involvement of local communities, keeping the concerns of local communities? So I've often said, look, all projects that come to the
Mm.
Ministry of Environment and Forests, now Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, there are three answers possible. The first answer is yes, let's do it.
Mm.
The second answer is yes, let's do it, but also do these safeguards. So there is a yes, but there's a third category which we must have the courage to say, and that is no. What happened in Silent Valley 40
Mm.
years ago? The Prime Minister had the courage to say, yes, we need hydropower. We can have hydropower in other ways, but Silent Valley needs to be protected because it's a very sensitive rainforest ecosystem. So we must recognize that there will be some occasions
Mm.
in which we have to say no. In Niyamgiri, for
Right.
example, when bauxite mining issue came up, I took the stand that we need the bauxite. There
Mm.
are alternative bauxite sites that are available, but this Niyamgiri is culturally very significant for Dongaria Cones. It's a cultural symbol for them, and that needs to be protected. Okay, fine, we'll give you the environmental clearance for bauxite mining, but
Mm.
not in the Niyamgiri Hill,
Mm.
because this is considered sacred to the Dongaria Cone. I think this category, yes, but no, this mindset we must have.
Right.
And we must not be afraid of consulting local communities. We must not be afraid of democratizing the decision making processes and
Mm.
give confidence to the people that ultimately these decisions are being taken, not bulldozing these decisions. And that's why, for example, we set up the National Green Tribunal in 2010.
Mm.
We passed a law in Parliament. The
Mm.
National Green Tribunal was set up. The National Green Tribunal was meant to involve people in environmental decision making. People could go to the national and say, look, these are the laws which are not being followed while giving environmental clearance or forest clearance. And so, in fact, the Great Nicobar project is now under challenge. It was
Yeah.
first challenged in the National Green Tribunal. Now it's under challenge in the Calcutta High Court, saying that due processes for environmental appraisal and
Mm.
for tribal rights under the
Mm.
Forest Rights Act have not been followed. So I think this debate, it is a polarized debate, no doubt about it. It is a polarized debate. It shouldn't be a polarized debate because we need faster economic growth,
Mm.
but we also need faster economic growth that is sustainable
Mm.
because climate change has imposed extraordinary vulnerabilities for India. We have large coastline, 11,000-kilometer long coastline where mean sea levels have risen. We
Yes.
have the monsoon whose behavior has become more and more
Yeah.
predictable. While the amount of rainfall has not changed in the
But,
long run,
but the
but its
extreme
time,
events and yeah,
the
yes,
frequency of extreme events has gone up.
yes,
Deforestation in sensitive areas has certainly been very sharp, and
mm,
that's beginning to affect microclimates.
yes,
The retreat of the Himalayan glaciers
yes,
can no longer be denied.
yeah,
There are some glaciers that are advancing. There are some glaciers that are retreating, but at a decelerating rate.
yeah,
But by and large, the majority of the Himalayan glaciers are under retreat.
yeah.
So the reality, the vulnerability of
There's
India
no denying of the
now,
actual, yeah,
20
what is
20
going
years
on.
ago, we
Yes,
were in denial.
yes,
And there's another very important fact. I
mm,
think the most important fact
mm,
that all this is imposing a public health cost. We are now seeing the morbidity and the mortality impacts
mm,
of air pollution, water
yes,
pollution, chemical contamination,
mm,
climate change. So 20 years ago, this was not
yeah,
part of the discourse. But today, we know
mm,
that environmental stress causes public health
public
stress,
health.
but it's also death.
Deaths, and it's also very long term is what we found just last month we published a 4-part series from Delhi where we went to the communities and we asked them about heat and floods and all of it. And the way they were responding was that, we don't go to work. When we don't go to work, we don't make money. When we don't make money, like, it's a very cascading cycle which they are unable to stop, and they're constantly living with either respiratory or like digestion related issues, and because the water is not clean, and like there's so many things, and it does come down to climate change and what
Yeah.
is really
No, I
happening.
mean, look at the whole issue, phenomenon of urban heat.
Yeah,
I
urban
mean,
heat, exactly.
15, 20 years ago, this was
Yeah,
not something, but
no,
we know there are large parts of India where
yes,
the mean temperatures have gone up by a degree Celsius,
yeah,
1 degree Celsius.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
very significant and
yes,
large increase.
yeah,
And that is going to affect livelihoods.
yes,
It's going to affect people's economic future, and
yes,
more importantly, it's going to impose a public health cost
yes,
on families.
on family,
Pollution, air pollution is already imposing. People are dying because of pollution. People are
yes,
not just becoming sick or
no,
ill. People are dying. The mortality because of pollution and contamination
yes,
is now becoming very evident. So I think, that the debate which was polarized should no longer be polarized,
right,
because the environmental impacts are here, they are visible, they are imposing a public health cost on us.
cost, right,
So the question then is, what do we do?
yeah,
What we have to do is we have to make tough choices.
mm.
And we have to make these tough choices in this framework that I have given you. There will be things where we have to give the go ahead, but very cautiously. And there will be occasions where we have to say, no, let's not touch this,
Right.
because this is too risky. And there's far too much uncertainty associated with its ecological impacts.
According to you, which projects or which parts fall under the strict no category? Would it be the
Well,
Aravallis? Would it be mangroves? Would it be?
mangroves would be a complete no go for me. When I was minister, we had categorized India's forest area into go and no go. 70% of our forest areas was go. Go means doesn't mean you can destroy it.
Right.
Go means you can apply, and then there will be a due process, there will be safeguards, but we are not going to a priori close those areas
Right.
for mining and for infrastructure. But there is 30% of our forest areas will be no go, which means they will be protected under any cost. There won't be any mining, there won't be any highway, there won't be any, rail links. So that's a no-go. This was done in 2011. Now we are giving clearances for projects. For example, recently, there's been a project in Singrauli for a power plant. It's bang in a rich no-go area in Madhya Pradesh, which also happens to be an elephant corridor.
Yeah.
So the Nicobar project that you talked about, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
So there are large parts of the forest area which we did. We did a mapping exercise. It was a scientific exercise, and a lot of organizations were involved. And ultimately, we identified 70-30. Okay, now you could argue about 70-30.
Yeah.
The government came, they said it should not be 70-30, it should be 90-10, fine, whatever it is. But if there is a no-go area, you must keep it as a no-go area. Now, what is a no-go area? Rich forest areas, very dense forest area, areas which fall under elephant corridors, tiger habitats, areas which are very essential for livelihoods for local communities.
Or biodiversity
Or
wise.
biodiversity. So, so far we have assuaged our guilty conscience by saying we'll do compensatory afforestation. This compensatory afforestation is a totally bogus concept. I tried my best when I was minister to get out of this compensatory afforestation, but I couldn't, because the Supreme Court and all other institutions.
It's like buying carbon credits.
So, yeah, it's like buying carbon credit. You're trying to assuage your guilty conscience. So, you're going to destroy pristine, unique biodiversity hotspot in Nicobar, and you're going to do compensatory afforestation in Haryana. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Forest is more than trees. Forest is an ecosystem. It's a diverse ecosystem. If compensatory afforestation, there's nothing to do with diversity. Normally, it's a monoculture,
Yeah.
forestation that I have seen and that people have seen. So mangroves is another good
Mm.
example. When the Navi Mumbai International Airport came up for clearance during my time, I was criticized very
Mm.
heavily for denying clearance for the original
Mm.
location because that was going to destroy very large areas of mangroves in New
Yes.
Bombay. And one lesson that we learned from tsunami in 2004, Dr. Swaminathan used to say
Mm.
that the most effective bioshield for India are the
Is the
mangroves.
mangroves? Yes.
And we are
Yeah.
going to destroy the mangroves. So these are examples where
Mm.
we have to be absolutely uncompromising.
I wanted to also bring in two things that 4C stands for. Like we stand for communities, commons, climate, and communication. But I wanted to bring in communities and commons here in terms of commons as ownership and usage and what we draw from commons, like whether it is forests, rivers, mountains. And you also mentioned that communities need to be involved in these decision making processes. I wanted to ask you, what is your understanding of how we understand the idea of communities and commons and their role in decision making process?
So far as forest areas are concerned, we have a law. We have the
Yeah.
Forest Rights Act of
Yeah.
2006. Now, that recognizes individual rights and that recognizes community rights. And without the settlement of individual rights, community rights, and without the written consent of the Gram Sabha, no projects should be undertaken in forest areas. This principle, by the way, has been upheld by the Supreme Court
Hmm.
in 2013 in the Niyamgiri verdict,
Yes.
where they said that the Gram Sabhas have to be totally involved and there must be prior consent for these projects. So for forest areas, we have a legal regime in place. Okay, we have this Forest Rights Act. In for other areas, we have a thing called hearings, public hearings. But unfortunately, the way we do public hearings,
Mm.
where there is public, we don't do the hearing, and where there is hearing, there is no public, because these are all manufactured, manipulated hearings. I've seen this time and time again in the environmental appraisal process. There's huge conflict of interest involved. There is, in many ways, these are things that are rushed through without the involvement, without the consent of local communities and hearing their concerns and taking the appropriate safeguard measures. So I think, little more honest due diligence is required as part of the process of environmental appraisal. I mean, you mentioned the Nicobar project, the Great Nicobar project. The project was challenged in the National Green Tribunal. The National Green Tribunal set up a high-powered committee,
Yeah.
to examine the process of environmental approval. Had it been followed? Had all the processes been followed? Had due diligence been done, and so on? They made a person the chairman of the high-powered committee. Now, that person, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, in another job, he had opposed the Great Nicobar project on the grounds that it would have very long term adverse environmental impacts. But as chair of the high powered committee of the NGT, he gave the go ahead, he gave the green signal for the Great Nicobar project. Now, that's an example of clear, conflict of interest. Pressure was being brought to bear on a professional, an otherwise fine professional, who had taken one position and 4 years later was forced to take another position. So we have to be absolutely honest in the due diligence that we do. We have laws. We have very progressive laws when it comes to environmental protection, coastal regulations,
Yeah.
forests. We have these laws. There is no shortage of laws in our country. We have passed these laws, but unfortunately, while we take great satisfaction in passing these laws, we take greater delight in bypassing them. So none of these laws really get implemented in letter and spirit. And
Right.
what is the debate that is taking place in many of these areas? Have you followed the Forest Rights Act? Have you followed the environmental impact assessment? Have you followed the coastal regulation zone rules? See, if there are laws, make sure that these laws are being
Yeah.
implemented. No?
And a lot of this probably would get sorted if they were followed properly, like all
Yes,
the systems that were in place.
we have a very progressive regulatory system. We
Mm.
have, no doubt about it. Things evolve over time. Like, for example, in 2009, we announced and promulgated the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. They were considered progressive for that time.
Yeah,
But today we require to review those
yeah,
standards. Okay,
right.
because we have had experience over the last 17 years on the public health impacts. Some pollutants may not be. Now, for example, I'll give you an example. The PM 2.5
Yes,
standard today is far tougher than it was 17 years ago.
yes,
We were focused on PM10 at that time.
yeah,
And now the concern is on PM 2.5. And our national ambient air quality standards for PM 2.5, when you compare it with the WHO guidelines,
yeah.
the WHO safety guidelines are almost 5 to 6 times tougher and
Tougher,
stricter
stricter.
than our standards. So we need to revive these standards.
Yeah.
But we have standards, we have regulations, we have laws, and we have to implement them.
Also, especially when it comes to environment and climate change, especially nowadays, there is this entire narrative that each one can make a difference, sort of a thing. And like, you live an eco-friendly life and all of that. However, at the same time, there are studies that show that individual way of life, like whether I use a paper cup or whether I use a wooden cup, has far lesser bearing on the actual impact, unless it comes from a systemic larger change,
Yeah.
like,
No, it's okay. Individual choices do matter.
mm,
How you deal with electricity in your house,
right,
whether you use public transport, private
yes,
transport, all those matter. But the overall macro
yeah,
picture is also very important.
yeah,
Very, very important. So yes, individual choices matter.
mm.
It's very easy for governments to say individual choices matter, because then you transfer
Sort
the
of the
responsibility for
onus is on me
the onus is
suddenly
on
to,
somebody
yeah,
else. No,
yeah,
but I am firmly of the view the onus is on the government of the day to set
mm,
the standards, to set the regulations, to
mm,
put the institutions in place, to enforce these standards. I mean, we have standards for industrial effluent going into the Ganga,
yes,
which have never been enforced.
yeah,
We have standards for pollutant load in the Yamuna that have
yeah,
never been enforced. So
yeah.
we have the standards, we have the institutions,
Mm.
but we have not enforced them.
So, in this situation, if I were to sort of come slowly towards our conclusion, how can young people participate, demand, get things going? And in general, also, like, overall citizenry, how do we sort of play a more impactful role in saving our hyperlocal environment and also having some role in larger decisions, even global for that matter, like,
Well, let me say that generational consciousness
hmm,
on environmental issues is far sharper today
hmm,
than it was 30 years or 40 years
right,
ago. When I was growing up in college, we were not environmentally all that conscious.
hmm,
Today, if you go to universities, you go to schools, you go to colleges, the awareness on climate change, the awareness on pollution levels, heat levels is far greater. So that's
hmm,
one positive thing. The question you're asking is, how can this new sentiment be leveraged?
hmm,
Now, we have institutions like the National Green Tribunal is an institution that was created to increase public consciousness. The public can go and file cases and seek relief. And in many cases, I must say, I disagree with the NGT on many things, but in some cases, they have actually provided a lot of relief, to local communities who have gone and sought appropriate remedies that are available to the public under the law that was passed by Parliament. We have a very large contingent of environmental activists in this country. They're not cockroaches, by the way.
I was just
But
going to say that.
and this contingent of environmental activism is very healthy. I mean, I ran an open door when I was a minister. I listened to the environmental activists. I disagreed with them. Medha Patkar used to do many demonstrations outside my office. I let her demonstrate. That occasions in which I disagreed with the activists, but the activists have a voice. They
Hmm,
represent a point of view.
Mm.
So I think our processes we must be mature. Those in power must be mature and bold and sure of their position so as to enable the participation of larger people. And I think the media today is far more environmentally conscious. Look at the Nicobar, the coverage that the
Yes.
alternative viewpoints, it's the government is saying it is necessary because it's strategic, we can deal with the threat of China. But there are equally influential voices which are talking about the ecological impacts this project is having, and it's all coming out in the media.
Mm.
So the public consciousness is greater, public
Mm.
awareness is greater, public sensitivity is greater.
Mm.
And I think we just, as they say, lage raho. You just have to keep at it.
Any final thoughts? Anything that you would like to add on the occasion of Environment Day? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, see, I'm a big skeptic about all these
Or the
days.
days?
Yeah, because then what
Yes.
happens is,
Then you do it on the day and don't do it
we
otherwise.
we do the Mangalarti.
Yes.
You know what Mangalarti is, right?
Yes, I
So
do.
we do
Yeah.
the Mangalarti on June 5th. And for the remaining, we forget everything. So the
Yeah.
Mangalarti is only on that day.
Right.
International Women's Day, World Environment Day,
100%.
World Tribal Day,
Yeah.
Indigenous Communities Day. So I'm a bit of a skeptic on all these days because every day has to be a World Environment Day.
Right.
Every day there has to be
Right.
environmental consciousness. Environment is, you see, the one of the great paradoxes of our lives, particularly in India. We are a civilization. We are a culture. We are a tradition in which life in harmony with nature has been made part of our consciousness. Prakriti rakshati rakshataha. Nature protects those who protect it. We are not like a Western culture or civilization, which is based on man's conquest of nature. The Indic civilization, remember I'm using the word Indic. So Indic civilization has been based on man living in harmony with nature. I mean, man, woman, people living in
Yeah.
harmony with nature. Which culture venerates animals as gods? Which culture venerates rivers as gods? Which culture venerates mountains as gods? It's amazing when you look at it. But which country abuses the mountains, abuses the forests, abuses the rivers? Few
Mm.
countries do it at the scale that we do it.
Mm.
So, the hypocrisy is so very,
Yeah.
very, very rampant and so very,
It's too
very obvious.
stark, I feel. It's too
Yeah, we
stark.
don't need to be taught anything on ecology.
Mm.
It comes to us.
Mm.
We are natural environmentalists. Let's put it that way.
And yet,
And yet we this great desire. I mean, this is also very important. Economic growth, economic advance. Absolutely, no question. We have to be wealthier. We have to be richer, but we cannot follow the traditional grow now, pay later model. That
yeah.
for 20 years, let's have economic growth, and then we'll worry about the consequences of the
Also,
economic growth later.
also, I mean, we need to be wealthier and richer, but then who is getting wealthier and richer, and who is not getting
Those
wealthier
are
and richer?
those
Much
trickle
larger
down,
issues, but yeah,
much
yeah.
larger issues. My
Yeah.
life, Prakriti Rakshati Rakshata. You
Right.
protect nature, nature
Mm.
protects you. You
Yeah.
protect the mangroves, you will be protected against the
Against
tsunamis.
the, yes. I mean, in fact, I have lived in Bombay for many years. So, and I have seen the July floods when they happened. I used to report for the Hindu at that time,
Yeah.
and you cannot overemphasize the importance of what protects you from the sea,
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
but yeah, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time, and we will be in touch with
Sure.
other stories and all of
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. As always, stay curious and tune in for more. This episode was hosted by Shovangi Biswas with an interview by Professor Prachi Pinglay. It was edited by Srinivas Aditya and illustrated by Vernika Singh. Signature tune composed by Dr Ananthu. Please write to us and follow us on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn.